The solution is we define our config trait for the balances palette. We move what we had previously here as generics into the config trait as associated types and restrict them by the same traits we've previously already had defined down here at the implement block. Now, in order to access either account ID or balance, we need to always access it through T. If we would say it's not T, but let's, for example, say C, then we would need to come here and get into account ID and balance through C. So it's one generic argument which implements config. And we had to update a few of our functions down here as well. But always, whenever we've previously used account ID or balance, now we need to access it through the generic argument. So in our case, T and double colon balance. Now, down here at the tests, we defined our struct test config and implement our balances config. On top of that, define what account ID and balance is. And when we define now our palette, we need to pass this struct, this test config as a generic argument. If we wouldn't do this, previously this would have worked because the compiler was smart enough to automatically pick up what kind of palette we actually create. Now it's not possible anymore. As you can see here, we have a palette with an unknown generic argument. Let's move on to main RS. Here we have our balances config, which is being implemented on top of our runtime. So our runtime implements the balances config, and we define what account ID and what balance is. For that, we again access our types, so our central repo of reusable types, and point to the account ID and balance. And here we can see the advantages of having the central types, storage, and action. Both of them point, for example, to account ID, and thus we can just come in here and say, okay, account ID is not a string anymore, but I don't know, U8 number, whatever, it doesn't matter. And it would technically work. Now we get a few errors because of the stuff down here, because now we create our runtime and alias is a string, but we expect a U8, but we could technically change it now and it would work. So it is flexible and balances expect now a U8. But we keep it as a string for now. Yeah, right. And the last change is that we again reference now self. We could just say runtime as well. And yes, the compiler doesn't throw an error. But self does seem a little bit more idiomatic, more expressive. You point to whatever you are, right? Instead of saying runtime. Self is a nice solution here. And that's it. I hope you've made it, and let's jump directly to the next lesson.